compassion. So I read those words recently, and I thought, the dew of compassion. Then I read the rest. So here's another hint. Have we had enough rain recently? Well, we're going to talk about different kinds of water today. Sort of cry, baby. Sad, very sad, right? Or not so sad. Janis Joplin, I'm very sad she died. But she'd be about my age now, about 76, you know. So we'd all say, shut up, you're out of tune. She was old. Somewhere a person is dying. Somewhere a person is crying. Here in Oak Park are people who have no permanent home. Here in Oak Park, someone is crying. People in Chicago are crying right now. People in Chicago are crying because a loved one or a neighbor or a friend got shot last night. In the Southwest, children are crying. I'm talking about New Mexico, Arizona, California, Florida. They've been taken from their parents. They're living in squalor. They are penned like cattle in a feedlot. People all over the world are starving. All over the world, people are crying their eyes and hearts out, crying them out fully. People are also crying out in joy. A girl has just found out someone gave her a prom dress. She's overjoyed and crying in amazement. People are crying, overjoyed at the birth of a daughter or a son, a niece, nephew, granddaughter, grandson. Teens finding young love cry. They're blissful. A team has won the World Series and their fans are crying in the streets. Can you imagine? People are crying with joy as they find their way into a new job. Their joy is boundless. And they... It's buffering again. Cry, 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 Roy Orbison. Crying, I'm crying. I can't be Roy Orbison. That was the next song. This doesn't appear to be here. No, it's buffering. The whole system doesn't work great. Okay. We won't be doing any more songs, but I would have played Roy Orbison. Yeah. Who hasn't cried? Who hasn't experienced tears when someone is diagnosed with a serious disease, a terrible illness? We cry because of our compassion, right? Who hasn't cried at the death of a loved one? Who hasn't experienced tears of joy? We cry with compassion. Who hasn't felt love for another? Who hasn't felt despair for another? From all those crying eyes, we could form a river of tears. So I would have played Joe Crocker, Cry Me a River. But the serious thing is, of course, we do cry because we have compassion. And if we cry for ourselves, we have compassion for ourselves. We're sad, we're angry, we're upset. And if we get by through the ego, we find compassion. Crying. Lots and lots of tears. I think these tears are the dew of compassion. I first learned about the dew of compassion when I read a line from the Lord Byron poem, The Tear, and here are some verses from it. When friendship or love, and by the way, this is 18th century, so it's really floral. You know? When friendship or love our sympathies move, when truth in a glance should appear, the lips may beguile with a dimple or smile, but the test of affection's a tear. Too oft is a smile, but the hypocrite's wile to mask detestation or fear. Give me the soft sigh, whilst the soul-telling eye is dimmed for a time with a tear. Mild charity's glow to us mortals below shows the soul from barbarity clear. Compassion will melt where this virtue is felt, and its dew is diffused in a tear. It's a much longer poem, and I can make copies, but I think I read you the best part of it. Dew of compassion. So I started thinking about moisture. I read that, and this is a long while back, because I gave Eve the title, but I really had no idea what I was going to talk about, except that I really liked the dew of compassion. Then it started raining, and I thought, oh, okay, I can talk about rain. And then fortuitous things happened. I'm studying with Genzan Kinel, who now lives in Japan. I've been studying as a part of a group, Shobogenzo, Dogen Shobogenzo, for about a year and a half. And in passing, not completely in passing, but when you read Dogen, you realize that he was getting his ideas from some place, not just his teacher Rushin, but some other place. And it turns out he really loved the Lotus Sutra. So I decided to read on my own the Lotus Sutra. Well, there's a fabulous chapter in the Lotus Sutra that I'm going to talk about today. The chapter is chapter 5, and it's called the Parable of Medicinal Herbs, or the Parable of Medicinal Plants, depending on what translation you read. How many of you are familiar with the Lotus Sutra? Great. It's a book. It's not like the Heart Sutra. It's long. It's book length. Here's the Lotus Sutra, translated by Burton Watson. I have another one at home translated by Gene Reeves. This is another of Gene Reeves' books. He was here in Chicago. He now lives in Japan. He was at a seminary here, part of the U of C. Anyway, this is an interesting book because he looks at all the various stories in the Lotus Sutra and talks about them and has commentary on them. And I read this too, but I read the Lotus Sutra, and the Lotus Sutra is just a wonderful, wonderful piece of work. So I really recommend it. It's not a book you're going to sit down and read before you go to sleep, because you'll probably fall asleep. But it is a book that you can read. All of us can read it and understand it. It's basically written for people who did not read. It's now written down, but it was an oral transmission. And they were stories that people could understand about what the Buddha was all about. And it is a magical. I wrote these words down because this is how I saw it. Magical, fantastical, allegorical, filled with visions of demons and humans and gods and dragons. I loved it that Roshi invoked dragons. Dragons are the protectors of the Buddhas. They're wonderful. They're not these things that you see in Game of Thrones.
What's that?
In the Lotus Sutra, buildings are ghost visions. Really, not buildings. Cities are ghost cities. Stupas suddenly appear and disappear. It's a powerful read, and it rains. So many chapters have garlands of flowers, millions upon millions, and numbers greater than we can imagine, of flowers coming down from the heavens. What are these flowers? Any guesses? Wild guess. What are these flowers?
Blessings?
Okay.
Offerings.
Offerings. Okay. The Dharma. The Dharma. So in chapter 5, there's a simile, which I think encapsulates what I'm trying to talk about here. The Buddha in this chapter, chapter 5, the Buddha is said to be like a great cloud that covers the entire world and dispenses a universal rain, a rain that falls everywhere. This rain is completely differentiated. So this is why I said somewhere someone's crying. Somewhere someone's crying in pain, somewhere's crying because someone died, because someone's born. Crying. It's completely undifferentiated. The Dharma meets everyone. It's the same everywhere, this rain, just like the Dharma. Trees, leaves, branches, roots, all receive rain. And that's described. I'm going to read it to you. Various types of trees, shrubs, grasses receive this rain. All kinds of flowers and plants receive this rain. Large and small alike receive this rain. Plants and flowers of various colors receive this rain. The rain nourishes all these plants equally, just like the Dharma nourishes all of us equally. From the largest to the medium sized to the smallest, this rain reaches everywhere, from the tops of the tallest trees to the deepest roots. This is the universality of the Dharma. This is Dharma rain. Remember, somewhere another person is helping someone else. At this very moment, and this moment, and this moment. I was going to play Bob Dylan, A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall. Too bad. Annie Lamott, great writer. Annie Lamott wrote, and this is in her latest book, From Almost Everything, which I found this little quote online. She wrote it online herself. I worry myself sick about the melting ice caps, the escalating arms race, and the polluted air as I look forward with hope to the clearing rains. So when we study the Dharma, it can really clear us. It can really provide something for us. Shakyamuni Buddha says in this wonderful sutra, the thus come one, worthy of honor and reverence, is profound and far-reaching in wisdom. For long he remained silent regarding the essential, in no hurry to speak of it at once. If those who are wise hear of it, they can believe and understand it. But those without wisdom will have doubts and regrets, and for all time will remain in error. For this reason, Kashyapa, he's talking to Kashyapa, and the thus come one is the Buddha. It's another name for the Buddha, and he's speaking of himself. He says these things. So, for this reason, Kashyapa, he adjusts to the person's power when preaching, expedient means, taking advantage of various causes and enabling the person to gain a correct view. Kashyapa, you should understand that it is like a great cloud that rises up in the world and covers it all over. I think I'm about to read from the book. Yeah, so I just want to say that if all of this rain is coming down on us, giving us the Dharma, and the Buddha is telling us this, what does that make us?
Grateful.
Grateful. Does it make us Buddhas? We're all Buddhas. We're all Buddhas. We may not be the Buddha, but we're all Buddhas. We have inherent Buddha nature. We are all Buddhas. The Dharma is raining down on us, reminding us, helping us. And if you don't get it, he says, well, then I'm going to give you something else so you get it. I'm going to keep raining on you. So I brought some pictures to remind us that we're all Buddhas. We're all Buddhas. This guy is a Buddha too. this story. Pat and I were in San Francisco. I think we were south of Market, but I'm not sure. I doubt if we were in the Tenderloin, but we were walking. We walk a lot. We walked by this guy, and I looked at him, and I thought he was dead. And I said to Pat, wait. And I went, and I stood over him, probably for 45 seconds until I saw him breathing. For sure, he was breathing. Then I said to Pat, wait, and I took a couple of pictures because I was so sad, so upset that someone lives their life, and for whatever reason, this way. But he's a Buddha. The rain hasn't fallen right on him yet. Maybe it will. So, let me read. I'm going to start a little bit backwards here. It doesn't matter, you haven't read it. So, the law of the Buddhas is, I should say one more thing. This is a really interesting thing about the Lotus Sutra. It's written in regular narrative. And then because you might not get it when they're talking, imagine that you're there with a host of people telling you these stories. And because you might not get it, then they tell it, whoever they were, in verse form. So I'm going to read the verse forms, because I think they're prettier and nicer. I look upon, so this, who do you think is speaking here? The Buddha. I look upon all things as being universally equal. I have no mind to favor this or that, to love one or hate another. I am without greed or attachment and without limitation or hindrance. At all times, for all things, I preach the law equally, as I would for a single person. That same way I do for numerous persons. Constantly, I expound and preach the law. Never have I done anything else, coming, going, sitting, standing. Never to the end, growing weary or disheartened. I bring fullness and satisfaction to the world, like a rain that spreads its moisture everywhere, eminent and lowly, superior and inferior, observers of precepts, violators of precepts, those fully endowed with proper demeanor, those not fully endowed, those of correct views, sorry, I just love this. Those of correct views, of erroneous views, of keen capacity, of dull capacity. I cause the Dharma rain to rain on all equally, never lax nor neglectful. When all the various living beings hear my law, they receive it according to their power. Dwelling in their different environments, some inhabit the realms of human and heavenly beings, of wheel-turning sage kings, Shakra, Brahma, and the other kings. These are the inferior medicinal herbs. Some understand the law of no outflows, are able to attain nirvana, to acquire the 6 transcendental powers, and gain in particular the 3 understandings, or live alone in mountain forests, constantly practicing meditation. The Buddha is like this. When he appears in the world, comparable to a great cloud that covers all things everywhere, having appeared in the world for the sake of living beings, he makes distinctions in expounding the truth regarding phenomena. The great sage, the world-honored one, to heavenly and human beings, in the midst of all beings, pronounces these words: I am the thus come one, most honored of 2-legged beings. I appear in the world like a great cloud that showers of moisture upon all the dry and withered living beings. How often do we feel dry and withered? I think it's why we all end up in Buddhism of one kind or another. I have to just stop this for a second and tell you about an experience I had. I was at my photo club Friday, and I was talking about something. And this guy, and I mentioned something about Buddhism, and this guy said, oh, that's solipsism. That's, what was the other word? What do people say about,
Navel gazing?
No, started with the end. It was
Nihilist?
nihilist. He said, they're solipsists, they're nihilists. And I looked at him and I said, oh my, no, not at all. I was so upset, so terribly upset. And as I'm reading this again, I'm remembering that and I'm thinking, this guy heard somebody talk, told him that Buddhists are nihilists and solipsists, and needs to read the Lotus Sutra. Okay, so I am the thus, if he pronounces these words, I am the thus come one, most honored of two-legged beings. I appear in the world like a great cloud that showers moisture upon all the dried and living beings, so that all are able to escape suffering. All are able to escape suffering. Gain the joy of peace and security, the joys of this world and the joys of nirvana, and the joy. There's no joys, just joy. The joy of nirvana. All you heavenly and human beings of this assembly, and we're told there are so many people. They're there, just in unbelievable numbers, you know. You read this, it's florid, it's ridiculous. Anyway, all you heavenly and human beings of this assembly, listen carefully and read with one mind. Listen carefully and listen carefully with one mind. All of you should gather around and observe the one of unexcelled honor. I am the world-honored one. None can rival me. In order to bring peace and security to living beings, I have appeared in the world, and for the sake of this great assembly, I preach the sweet dew of the pure law. The dew of the pure law. So, we're back to dew and water and rain. It's just great. But then, I'm reading the Lotus Sutra, and I'm thinking about Dogen too. And Dogen says, all the world is in a dewdrop. Right? He says that. He also says, because earth, grass, trees, walls, tiles, and pebbles in the world of phenomena in the 10 directions all engage in Buddha activity, sentient and non-sentient. Everything is the world of the Buddha. In the 10 directions engage in Buddha activity. Those who receive the benefits of the wind and water are inconceivably helped by the Buddha's transformation, splendid and unthinkable, and intimately manifest enlightenment. Those who receive these benefits of water and fire widely engage in circulating the Buddha's transformation based on original realization. So I kept reading, and I read about the story of the dragon girl, which I commented a couple weeks ago. I'll talk about the dragon girl another time, I think. It's a great story, but not now. It's mostly about the power of the Dharma and how the Dharma can transform us all to Buddhas. That's all. Am I doing on time, by the way? No idea what
24
time.
minutes.
Doing good.
24 minutes.
24 minutes to go. I've
20.
only used, wonderful. So there's one last chapter I want to mention. It's not said directly in here. But I think all of this rain sort of helps Buddhas emerge from underground because of the Dharma rain. How many of you have seen this wonderful sculpture? It used to be down Hyde Park. I just learned the other morning. But it's now along the lakefront, south of Foster, but I'm not exactly sure where. I saw this and I thought, wow! But usually I'm riding my bike and I can't stop. But I decided when I knew I was doing this, I decided to stop and take that
May I say that's by my friend Indira Johnson, Chicago artist.
Well, your
And there are
friend,
8 of them.
there are 8 of them, yes. But I decided, actually, if you look at this, so I'll talk as a photographer for a moment. You could see cars and people on bikes and trees and so forth in the background, so I blurred that out because I wanted the focus to be on the Buddha's and look like it was just something emerging, truly emerging. And I decided to only take a picture that included, I actually had 3 and then I cropped it because I didn't want a whole lot, because I didn't want it to look like an installation. I wanted it to look like, hey, they're really emerging. You know? Just like we all have a chance to emerge. So here is the part. Oh, wrong book. This chapter is chapter 15. It's called Emerging from the Earth. So let me just read 2 little parts here. I'm going to give you a sense of the size that's talked about here. Each of these bodhisattvas was the leader of his own great assembly, and each brought with him a retinue equal in number to the sands of 60,000 Ganges. A retinue of his own great assembly, equal in size to 60,000 Ganges and the sands of those. To say nothing of those who brought retinues equal to the sands of 50,000, 40,000, 30,000, 20,000, and or 10,000 Ganges. Lots more. All these bodhisattvas. Or a retinue equal to as little as the sands of 1 Ganges, half a Ganges, 1/4 of a Ganges, or as little as 1 part in 1,000, 10,000, a million Nayutas of Ganges. Even the tiniest bit is good enough, right? Or those whose retinue, oh wait, I read that, sorry. Or only 1,000,000, 10,000, or only 1,000, 10,000, 100, 10,000, or just 10,000. Only 1,000, 100, or 10. Or who brought with them only 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1 disciple. Or those who came alone, preferring to carry out solitary practices. Such were they, then immeasurable, boundless, beyond anything that can be known through calculation, simile, or parable. After these Buddhist bodhisattvas had emerged from the earth, it's said that they were 3 feet under the earth, or 3 inches. 3 feet or 3 inches, or 3 miles maybe. Who knows? Or maybe they were really always above earth, I started thinking. And we just never noticed them. We never heard them. We never saw them. You know? I mean, these are things that I start thinking about. Who knows? You know? And then, let me see this other part here, so I can read it to you in verse now. Immeasurable thousands, 10,000, millions, a great host of bodhisattvas, such as was never seen in the past. I beg the most honored one of 2-legged beings to explain where they have come from. Did I miss the part? Wait. Where they come up. I want to let you hear how they come up. Yeah, I did. Sorry. Oh no, let's see. I'm sorry, give me a sec here, boy. This is not the best teaching, is it, when you're not organized? I can't find where it says they arose, but it's really deep. So All these bodhisattvas, with their great dignity, virtue, and diligence, who preached the law for them, who taught and converted them and brought them to this. Under whom did they first set their minds on enlightenment? What Buddha's law did they praise and proclaim? What sutra did they embrace and carry out? What Buddha way did they practice? These bodhisattvas possess transcendental powers and the power of great wisdom. The earth in 4 directions trembles and splits, and they all emerge out of it. World-honored one, from times past I have seen nothing like this. I beg you to tell me where they came from, the name of the land. I have constantly journeyed from land to land, but I have never seen such a thing. In this whole multitude, there's not one person that I know. Suddenly they have come up from the earth. I beg you to explain the cause. The members of this great assembly now, the immeasurable hundreds, thousands, millions of bodhisattvas, all want to know these things regarding the causes that govern the beginning and end of this multitude of bodhisattvas, possessor of immeasurable virtue, world-honored one, we beg you, dispel the doubts of this assembly. So they were all there, all the time. We just never noticed it, I guess. And I want to all remind you that Dogen said, listen to the sound of raindrops at midnight. The raindrops have the power to pierce not only moss, but also rock. Thanks for allowing me my, whatever it is I like to do.
It was great.
Yeah.
Thanks. Any comments or questions? I'm sorry about the music too.
Yeah.
Shall we try the music again?
Sure.
Yeah. Any comments or questions about it? Bye, Suze.
Well, I appreciate what you said about the undifferentiated nature of Dharma, that in your comparison to rain, because it's really a powerful image that rain penetrates everything. It does not differentiate. It doesn't. It really is very. It really shows equanimity, doesn't it?
Yeah. I'm glad you like that.
Yeah, beautiful.
And it can wear down the hardest object, rocks,
Yes.
stuff like that.
I don't know that wear down Dogen means. I think he means it can penetrate.
Penetrating.
And transform.
And transform, exactly. So, I once heard Jack Kornfield describe whatever the number is. Who knows what the greatest number is? That Malkapa is it? Or some. And he was saying that number is what it will take for a bird every 1,000,000 years flying over Mount Everest with a feather, rubbing the feather against Mount Everest to cause Mount Everest to be dust. So, it's like rain doing that. It can ultimately modify everything. Ultimately, this earth.
Yeah.
That's Dogen saying that, though. That's not whoever the author of the Lotus Sutra was, and they don't know. Because remember, it was oral tradition, and it finally got written down. I think either in the introduction to Burton Watson's or in this, they say they think it was like 300 or 400 years after the Buddha's death. So that would have been what would that have been?
2nd century.
2nd century BC.
Well, this picture is very moving, the one of the fellow they thought was dead. So many times, living downtown, go by people and don't know if they're dead or alive. It's very, very sad to have to look at because they just lie there, in the middle of the street. And
I took this Friday morning. I was coming back on Randolph Street on my bike. I was stopped at Randolph and Wells, and because I had a light, I was able to have enough time to take this picture. Yeah, thank you, Pat. You're right. absolutely. I'm going to have an exhibit, I don't know, probably in the basement, if we can do it, of what I'm going to call Buddhas, and it's going to be many of my street pictures. Very often they're sitting like Buddhas, you know, cross-legged, sitting there. Okay, let's see. Buffering. All right, so we're going to do it a different way.
Mark, you need an old-fashioned boombox.
Yeah, like Vivian had.
Yeah, no, I'm going to shut this off. I'm going to shut this off.
You have them somewhere, Mark. You want me to get it?
The boom box? Yeah, but it's got a link to this. It's got to be
Oh, it
Bluetooth.
doesn't have a plug-in
I don't.
into your
I don't.
earphone jack?
Oh, yeah, can you do that?
Yeah.
Oh, sure, that's great. Okay. Anything happening? No. What a
Where's the
shame.
8-year-old when you need one, right?
Really?
Yeah.
Figures it out.
Something just happened here. You know, she will tell you that I went to a lot of work making this little playlist. I really did, and then...
I can't find it.
All right, okay, so somehow I'm going to shut this off, if I can. There, I think I should. No. See, the problem is, oh, I know what I can do. I can,
You can disconnect it from your Bluetooth.
yeah, disconnect the Bluetooth. Just shut my Bluetooth off. Okay, now we're going to hear it not as good, of course, but what should we try? Start with Cry Baby?
Yeah.
Are you still recording?
Mm-hmm.
Do we need to?
That's up to you.
No, I don't think we need to. Bye, everybody. Thank you for watching.